Welcome. Would you like to know what the future of retail looks like, especially natural products retail? In this podcast episode, we talk exactly about that. But before we can understand what the future looks like, you've got to look back in the past. You've got to be able to look back in the past and understand the history of the industry, especially the natural channel. This is important because it gives you a better feel and a better appreciation for how far we've come. As Walter Robb said in this podcast episode, it's like the tributaries running into the river that run into the ocean. Understanding where those tributaries build their momentum, where they collect the water, that's critically important because it helps you understand this movement, this thing we call healthy eating. In this podcast episode, I had a great conversation with Walter Robb about the natural channel, about his role in helping explode the growth of the natural channel, from helping Whole Foods go from 12 stores to 475 stores. More importantly, we talk about the future of retail, what it looks like, and what the opportunities are, especially for young disruptive brands. We also talk about a lot of the things that you need to be paying attention to if you want to get your products onto more store shelves and into the hands of more shoppers. Walter, thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate your making time for me. Can you please start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to Stonewall Rob?
You bet. I am well. I'm a 40-year-old grocer, and started in 1978 with a little grocery store. And as you know, I was with Whole Foods until we sold to Amazon in the late summer of 2017. So post Whole Foods, I've been continuing to take the same set of values and set up a little company called Stonewall Robb, which is working on investing in the next generation of food companies, trying to mentor CEOs along their way, and generally try to build a healthier world.
I appreciate that. And just as a side note, I've been a big fan of yours. I've watched you present several times, and I've always been in awe of what you've done and what you're doing to help the industry. So thank you. I also want to say that in preparation, I went through all the videos and the podcast episodes on your website. There's so much more I didn't know about you. So I highly recommend anyone listen to that. I've learned a lot more about you. So let's start at what really matters, food. How did you get so interested in food, and why did that become so important to you?
Well, I think the best answer to that is just the way life unfolds. I got interested in whole grains and natural food through my then wife and her parents, who were grinding their own grain. So, I mean, I was looking. I was fascinated by the fact we were grinding our own grain and making our own bread. I remember the first loaf of bread, that whole grain bread that came out of the oven, and smelling it and tasting it. It was not like any bread that I'd grown up with, and I just got excited about whole foods with a small W, and started reading. Read a lot of books, and messed around in the kitchen, and just kind of realized that the natural food was something I was really drawn to. And you got to put it in the context of the times, which is that, remember, we're talking about the 60s generation. We're talking about folks that are going to change the world. And so why not change the food system along with it?
Sounds good to me. So on that note, why did you decide to launch your own retail store?
Well, again, as a young person, you're always looking for what you're going to do in the world. And given that I was drawn to the natural foods, I came up with it. There was nothing in my background or my family that would suggest I would do such a thing. In fact, part of my family thought I was stark crazy. But I got excited about the idea of what I thought natural foods could do for the world. And so I scraped together some money and put together the store, and to take that first entrepreneurial step. I had been a teacher before. I had been a farmer. I'd done a couple things, but this seemed like the right direction to pursue. I had no idea where it would end up.
So when you've got your own store going, what did you learn? What caused you to want to continue on this path to Whole Foods and beyond?
Well, it was like part of a large, groundswell that started in the mid to late 70s, and then just kept on gaining steam as people realized the connection between food and health. And it was certainly not a straight line. It was herky-jerky up and down and sideways. But it's hard to communicate now because it's become fairly mainstream. But at the time, the sense of mission and purpose that animated all of those efforts was so powerful that it was really like an updraft. And I felt it. I worked with it. I kept going. I kept learning. I kept building relationships, and from there, it carried me to sell my store to Whole Foods in 1989, store number 12 for the company, and then from there to build out to the 475 stores we had when we sold to Amazon. So it's the best thing I can describe it is you're doing something that feels exactly right, and you may not know exactly how to do it or if you're doing it right, but it feels right, and that's what it felt like.
Well, that's why I do this. So I appreciate your coming on and sharing that. I used to be a grocery manager many, many years ago, back in the 80s, dating myself
Okay.
as well. But anyhow, I was a grocery manager for Price Club and retail management before that. But I used to bring in a lot of the natural, healthy, organic products that were locally grown.
Hmm.
In fact, actually,
Yeah.
one of the first energy bars. So I'm right with you there in terms of trying to help people understand why this matters and why this is so critically important. That was back before healthy food became more mainstream.
Hmm.
So as you're building your
Exactly.
store out, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing with you. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and well, and I love it because I've had a lot of I've had the privilege of talking to a lot of amazing people in this podcast. For example, when I was talking to Gary Hirschberg, we're talking about how you vote with your dollars and how healthy food matters. And so, if you are what you eat, then what you eat matters. And one of the things that I really appreciate when I was listening to some of the content on your website is how you get into the weeds, but more importantly, how you make sense of what we're eating and why that's important. And as you were kind of saying, to kind of paraphrase, it helps give us the nutrition we need. It helps build our bodies. It helps keep us healthier longer. It gives us a lot of the things. It helps us give us the fuel that we need to get through the day. Can you talk a little bit more about that? So as when you're building your food store, what was the goal? How are you trying to leverage that?
Yeah. Well, first thing at that point in my life, I was just trying to make a living,
Okay.
right? And do something that I actually enjoy doing. So, when you're a young person and you don't have a lot of resources, you're just trying to make it all work. So, I mean, there was a lot to figure out as we went along. But again, the idea was to create a store where we could begin to support local farmers, where we could bring some organic product into the community, where we could make that sort of impact that we felt, or bring that sort of alternative we felt wasn't available to the customers in the community. And it was a small store. The first one was only 1,000 square feet, not that big. Then it went to 3,000 square feet at the end, as we went along. But I think it's just we wanted to create this place where healthier food was available as we saw it, and we started working in the Trinity County where the store was, and working with the different farmers up and down the river. And of course, then it went down and did the second store in the Bay Area, where it was a larger community to affect. But I don't know. I think I always said that the store was the canvas upon which we were able to paint our purpose and values. So the store was the expression of the deeper desire to create a healthier food system. And we didn't really have all the language that we have now about this, but we talked a lot about whole foods being healthier for you, right? Whole foods in their whole state, with nothing taken away or nothing added, are more health giving than foods that are not whole foods. And so we started with that premise. And as you know, Whole Foods started with the premise of no artificial ingredients or preservatives. So it was kind of the base case that this food in their whole state are the most health giving, and you should stick to a whole foods diet. And that's pretty much where we are now. People have realized the power of eating a whole yam or a whole green or a whole grain of some sort, and that's really what it's about.
And
The
thank you
store
for
is just a way to get that. The store just got a way to bring that to bring that forward, and you can do it digitally now in ways that you couldn't do then. And obviously the future is going to be a combination of digital and physical. But at that time, the store was a beautiful expression of those beliefs.
I love that concept, that the expression of a healthy food system, which is so critically important. Again, this is why we're having this conversation. So, can I ask you, how much did you influence John Mackey and Whole Foods, or was it sort of a mutual? Because what I'm getting at is that communicating that message, that value to the consumer, and building a strategy or building a retail environment around it is no simple task.
Hmm.
So, how did that come about?
Well, John, the industry was fairly small in the early days, and John and I had met each other several times. And obviously, he was the first one to come from Texas and build the Whole Foods out in Northern California. We had looked at joining up forces a couple times prior. Finally, worked in '89 when I was able to sell the Mill Valley store to him, which was store number 12 for the company. Did we? I mean, absolutely influenced each other, I believe. Look, I learned a lot from John. I still learn from John. He's an incredible visionary. He's got a mind for business, and he's got a deep set of thoughts about capitalism in general, the business form that we all practice. Hopefully in a conscious manner. And I would say that he learned things from me as well, and so that's why we ultimately evolved into the co-CEO roles, where we shared and pushed back on one another to help. But we absolutely shared the desire to make Whole Foods the very best that it could be, and that's really what joined us together, along with the other members of the team. So I think it's a good reminder that you build things by learning and growing with other people, or in partnership with other people, whatever your respective roles. That you can do it by yourself, but it's more fun, and then you can go faster, and you can learn a ton working with others, and the power of the team.
Well, and I appreciate your fact that, again, all the humility that you bring to this industry. So thank you, and thank you for sharing. So when you're building your team together, what caused you to go from, or what helped you go from 12 stores to almost 500 stores? Was it more acquisition based, or was it more building your own stores from the ground up?
Well, initially it was there was a lot of acquisition. As you may recall, there was in the course of 4 or 5 years, the acquisition of 3 of the major operators in Los Angeles, Boston, and I'm trying to remember the third city here, but Washington D.C.
Oh, okay.
That one's later.
Okay.
But in the early 1993, there was Fresh Fields, there was Bread and Circus, and Mrs. Gooch's. Boom, boom, boom. And so initially, the acquisition of those 3 in less than 5 years was a major driver of the company growth. Obviously, adding and integrating all those stores. Subsequent to that, we did about another 18 or 19 acquisitions or M&As, but we also grew well organically. Opening 20, 25 stores a year for a while, building out the company. So initially, a lot of acquisition, and then from there was a combination organic growth, strong organic growth, and really, I think you need both to do it successfully, because you have to keep building up your own internal strength and your team and your momentum. But when you do buy another company or join another company, that always adds something to the mix. The recipe changes a little bit. The dynamics change a little bit. You learn from one another, and you can add some of that and subtract as you need to. And I think that's always described Whole Foods as like a river moving its way towards the ocean. Along the way, the tributaries joining of these different companies that we joined with to make the river bigger and stronger and wider. And have we arrived at the ocean now? I don't know. I'll leave that to you to sort of judge. But we're close. We're close in the sense that we've become into the main body of water, which is the main body of thought about. I heard on a piece on CNBC yesterday saying that a major meta-study research showed that food and Whole Foods is the best way to not get diabetes type 2. So when you start hearing statements like that, you realize that people are getting awful close to the connection between Whole Foods and whole health, not just of the individual, but also of the community, of the planet, and overall health of the farmer as well. So,
well, I'd like to say that you also made a tremendous impact on mainstream. And to kind of frame this, I had a theory that I wanted to prove. And so for the 2016 Category Management Handbook, I had the opportunity, the privilege to go in and look at every category and understand what was driving sales in every category. And so to quickly frame this, the genesis of this was all outlet sales. So total dairy was up 1.5%. Organic dairy was up 12%. Organic dairy represented only 9.8% of that small sliver of the pie. If you remove that small sliver, then total dairy is up only 0.5%. When you talk about plant-based and gluten-free and all those other attributes, it's a smaller sliver and even more dramatic growth. And so I'd like to think one of the things I would credit you the most for doing is your impact on mainstream, giving more voice or more bandwidth or more breadth to this movement that we call healthy eating. So any thoughts about that? Anything you want to share about that?
well, yeah, I mean, I think, there's an awful lot of people that have been part of this, making this all get to this point in time. And I think at Whole Foods, we definitely had a strong team, and we're very important to the quality of food being established as kind of a benchmark. But I would say also what affected the pace of that was the media waking up. There was the Alar story around chemicals in apples. There was, various media things that burst out over the that spiked people's interest and woke them up about what they were eating. There was the progression of, and the amount of coverage that the food industry began to get, particularly in the last 10 years. There was the scientific community that began to make discoveries and, create linkages that didn't exist. And there was, the public policy piece where the organic law got passed in 2000, which was a really important milestone, and to put a federal seal on organic food. So, it's a combination of the push that we had to build out stores that people felt comfortable in, along with the growing selection of product for all the brands that built out these great choices for customers, the regulation improving, the media coverage improving, the science improving. All these things helped to bring all of this forward, and it took it took a village to make it happen. No question about it.
Absolutely. And we're just beginning. So back to your comment, we're not at the ocean yet, but we're on our way. So one of the challenges that I find, Walter, is that a lot of the consumers that understand this, that get this, these core consumers, the ones that are driving the trends throughout the entire ecosystem, including at mainstream, like you said, on several of the things that I listen to, that there's a lot of confusion about what is natural or what is healthy. And again, if you are what you eat matters, and that gets into the soil, the composition of the soil, and the nutrients that you're getting in the food. So what do you think is the best way, or what do you think the challenges are around communicating that message to the end consumer and then broadening that message over the entire industry?
It's a great question, Daniel, and I think therein lies one of the great business opportunities for the next generation, is to say, how do we solve for that? Because, as you know, I've said out loud, data shows that 80% of customers are just overwhelmed or confused by their choices around food. They know they want to make a healthier choice, and they are doing that in different ways, but they're also questioning themselves about. And one of the reasons is because the science keeps changing so quickly, that you're kind of always rocking around there, figuring out if you got the right information, if you're doing the right thing, if you're doing everything that you can. So, do I have a suggestion? I think as we invite all companies to move to full transparency about their ingredient decks, about their processes, about their sourcing. We invite the brands to do that. We invite the retailers to all step up and provide that sort of information for the customers. We build a more transparent food system that's built on clear standards. I think that is one opportunity. And I think what I've called the last mile of data, the last mile of information, we need to build the pipes in such a way that the customer on their device can access the type of information they need to help them make the choices they need to make. And the problem is it's so much, it's overwhelming for most people. Maybe not for you, or maybe not for me, but for many people, it's just overwhelming. And we've got to find filtration isn't the right word. We don't want to filter it, but we want to somehow help. We want to personalize the information delivery in a way that allows them to make their choices more clearly. And I think the next generation of entrepreneurs will help to make that happen. This last mile of information, because there's abilities to bring that and deliver that in ways that didn't exist before. I hope ultimately all the way back to the farm or back to the seed. But every person may need different bits of information or in order to make those choices. But I think we have an opportunity to build that out now that we know and we agree that the quality of food matters as a baseline. Mm-hmm. Now let's go from there to build out the different attributes and make that information available to people in a way that helps them to make their own choices.
One of the reasons that this podcast exists, the reason I do what I do, is to help brands leverage that knowledge. In other words, what I'm getting at is I don't believe that the brand should say, hey, I'm a nice guy, and expect the retailer, please put my product on your shelf and expect the retailer to do all the heavy lifting. My philosophy, my belief is that the customer that I drive into Whole Foods as a brand is far more important than the ingredients in my package. And what I'm getting at is if I as a brand could own my customer and build a community around me, around my brand, that I can leverage those insights to expand my base, expand my community, et cetera. But the point is that I think that's where the education needs to go. And by helping brands understand how to communicate the value of that unique customer to the retailer, in my opinion, is far more valuable than slotting or any of the fees. But more importantly, in my opinion, that's how we start down this path. Your thoughts?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think we're singing out of the same hymnal here in terms of it can go. I think for brands, they tend to sometimes think in their own terms. I would encourage them to think about the fact that the customer's at the center of the universe now,
Yes.
and to state their features and benefits in terms that are accessible to the customer or in customer terms, because customers just have too many choices. So brands got to get a little more discipline around what their message that they're bringing. But I'm just saying there's going to be new ways. There already are way new ways to deliver your message digitally, all these different platforms that didn't exist. But it's important that you think about who's receiving it, how they're receiving it, how they digest it, how they act on it. And that's the whole frontier that I think is there, so that we can take this work that we've done and make it even more effective. And we hadn't solved it yet. There are different retailers have different apps that have different qualities or different aspects to the app itself, which does begin to move in the direction of personalization. And that's what's going to keep on happening. So we can really, whether you're a brand or whether you're a retailer, you all serve the customer at the end, and the customer is asking for greater information, also greater clarity.
So, and I appreciate your sharing that. You've talked a lot about the value of intelligence, of technology,
Hmm.
etc. One of
That's
the
right.
things that I've found is that technology tends to commoditize the shopper and it tends to commoditize the products. And so, what I mean by that, Walter, is that there's a big difference between soup with added salt or the soup that has the salt that you get from chicken noodle soup that comes naturally from the chicken, or salt that's, for example, Himalayan pink salt, etc., than iodized salt. And what I'm getting at
Right.
is, if you are what you eat, understanding those nuances, and then being able to communicate
Hmm.
the value or the importance of those minerals to the consumer, to me, that's the key opportunity. I think that's the thing that's missing. And when I look at the technology, the syndicated data providers, etc., nobody gets that right. Do you have any ideas around that?
It's a very good point. But I think technology in general has allowed a wider reach for the quality of these foods and faster. So brands can build direct relationships with their customers, not going through the intermediary if they so choose. And brands have been built out to the $5-10 million level directly to their customers with new sorts of exchanges and information. With respect to the data collection, which is what you're saying, yeah, no, I think look, the force in the market as something gets bigger tends to want to commodify and just become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And the whole premise of this industry is that we're not going to race to the bottom. We're going to continue to raise the level that we're striving for as we produce the quality of food. And then quality of food costs more to produce quality food. So, and we're going to stand behind that until we find the right balance point between the growth and the pricing. And if I heard that question 1,000 times, obviously at Whole Foods is, how do you, the price and the quality, how do you think about those two things together? But to your question, I think the data will have to get more specific. Yeah, using your salt example, and if you're just looking at the salt category and you're not picking up those differences in the product choices that are there for the customer, the data is not going to be as helpful, as it would be otherwise. So, but look, those data collection systems are in the first inning,
Right.
and it's not the data itself; it's all the algorithms and the AI that's going to sit on top of that. That's going to begin to sort that out into a more meaningful, personal form for the customer.
And what I do is I pay attention to where the ripple in the pond starts. In other words, I've
I
got
like
an
that.
idea. I want to come up with, how do I get this to market? What do I do with it? And so what I focus on, Walter, my secret sauce is paying attention to those nutrient rich foods, etc. Chia, for example, or gluten free. Back before it became a big deal, I knew that it was going to be a big deal because I was watching those ripples form long before they became a tsunami and ended up on a Walmart shelf. So that's what I'm getting at, is helping the brands understand how first of all, how to capitalize on that. What are the trends? Skating to where the puck's going. And then more importantly, helping the retailer appreciate the value that you're driving on shelf. So back to the organic milk example, what I find is that a lot of it, you were talking about at one point, the comment whole page, the comment, excuse me, whole paycheck, or the fact that you were talking about the
Yeah.
value or the cost of food. I firmly believe that brands should not apologize for having the very best ingredients. So with that said, it's about the value. The reality is that consumers will pay a premium for products that meet and exceed their needs. If not, decadent products and luxury products would be declining in sales, but they're not. So how do you recommend that a brand focus on the value that they bring to the retailer, to the consumer, as opposed to the bottom line cost?
Yep. Well, first of all, I love that you have a secret sauce. Thank you for revealing that on the podcast. Everybody should have a secret sauce.
Yeah.
And number two is I think that the price quality question will probably go on for eternity if people will. But you got to remember that not everybody can afford the quality of food, and that's one of the big issues for me in this next body of work. Is I really feel strongly about the democratization of access to fresh, healthy, quality foods, because we all know the impact that has. And so Whole Foods was not able to serve everybody. We never served probably more than 20 or 25% of the U.S. population. What we want to work with over time here, as we continue to hold the line on quality, is to build the quantity up to where we have it available to more people so that they can have the benefits of that, whether it's going in the inner city communities, whether it's looking at our programs, whether it's building stores out in different areas, whether it's just building volume in areas to where the price point can come down. All those things will be part of making sure that this food that we have helped to nurture and support over these 30, 40 years can be available to more and more people. And that is a big theme of the future. It's a big challenge, I think, is there for the food industry, is to take the quality food and make it accessible to far more people.
So critically important. And I agree with you 100%. And this is why I do this. My mission is to make our healthy way of life more accessible by getting more healthy brands or more store shelves in the hands of more shoppers. That includes online. Basic supply and demand. The more that we can increase the demand, the more that we can, affect the price. One of the issues that I'm also fighting or trying to help these brands deal with is the cost of getting their products on the shelf. Natural brands, especially small natural brands, are so unfairly burdened with costs that the larger companies don't have to take on. For example, slotting and the broker, the distributor, and stuff like that. So going back in time, I remember when we had distributors for, several distributors, even in Denver, Colorado. They're gone now because of the inefficiencies and stuff. And yeah, they do have a need. But my point is, if we were to make it easier for the brands to get their products onto the shelf, to lower the cost of goods, to help the retailer remain relevant, I mean relevant compared to other competitors in the market, et cetera, to me that sounds like one of the things that we can do to help improve the food system and solve some of these other problems. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, what I hear you saying is that what I see happening is that there's more brands being created than ever before, right?
Right.
So there's all this new generation of entrepreneurs that are taking the food system in all different directions, and it's a lot of new foods and a lot of diversity of foods that hasn't existed up to this point. Mm-hmm. We talked about their path to market is not just to go on the store shelves anymore. Their path to market is to go on the e-com platform or the online platforms and sell there, and that's what a lot of the young companies have done to get to market. So I think both pathways are necessary. Some customers want to be served in the store, or they want to be served online. That's just the way of it. The online shopping penetration in the U.S. is probably 5%, probably going to 20% of folks that are going to shop online. So I'm not sure I completely understood your question, but I think this explosion of new food choices that's happened over the last 5 years, the explosion of diversity of foods and source of foods is very exciting, and has really shaken up the marketplace in a way that we haven't seen since I've been a grocer. I've never seen the explosion of new choices and new products that's happening right now.
Which is really exciting. So what I was getting at is that I'm a category management expert by trade, first person certified at the highest level of category management proficiency. What I was getting at is that if we can help brands identify which promotions make the most sense, how to maximize your trade spending, how to identify what stores you need to be in as opposed to just getting into any store that says, hey, you're a cool product. To be able to help those brands basically be able to get more runway, to be able to do more. And then as a result, those brands could do more good to support some of the other causes you have. So that's what it's getting at. So when we're talking about getting more of those
Well, you're right
exciting,
about that. You're right.
go ahead.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, and brands have to make, the resources are not unlimited. They have to make choices. And increasingly, I see a tension between their desire to market directly versus to market with and through the retailer. And they have to do both. And so they've got to decide where to put their, and that they need help thinking about that, and which resources to put down where. If they're going through a category review process, which you know intimately, they're deciding whether to join the marketing programs of the retailer, or they're thinking about investing in, the Instagram platform, whatever it might be. They have to make choices and where to allocate their dollars, and it's complicated. And there's far more choices to go to market today than there were even 10 years ago. So that's your point. I agree with you.
Well, yeah, and then so what I'm getting at, and I agree with what you were saying. I believe a brand needs to have a dual platform, and I am 100%. In fact, a lot of times I'll recommend that emerging brands start in digital or online so they can get the runway, so they can afford to go in traditional retail. So
Yeah.
as brands are building out and growing at retailers, what can a retailer do to help a brand? What do you see the future of that being?
Yeah. Well, I think it starts with the right attitude that that the retailers and the brands need each other. I mean, we learned at Whole Foods that there's a limit to how much private label the customer wants. The customer wants the brands and
Mhm.
wants the stories. That was at least our experience at Whole Foods. And so, if we went too far in a category with private label, we got a lot of pushback from the customers saying we want to see the right balance with the brands. I think it starts with a mutual respect and appreciation for each other. Hopefully, in Whole Foods there was a core value of win-win relationships, but we didn't always. I think there were times when we were not always true to that value, and the suppliers let us know that, and there was times perhaps where they would ask too much or want too much. So I think it's a dance that goes on all the time. But I think it starts from this idea that these entrepreneurs are producing products or bringing products that are really exciting for customers. Increasingly, the customer is looking for what's the next thing or what's on the edge. I know Whole Foods is looking for new ideas, not just more of the same, and to build out a category as they build out a category. So I think if the retailer can be a good partner, pay on time, uh, execute the agreements that have been made, the commitments have been made in terms of purchasing and distribution and store facings. If the brand can stay in stock, have the inventory when it's needed, step up and support their brands with demos, and also innovate. In other words, keep moving and keep bringing new things forward as part of that brand. So investing in the brand itself, so that the retailer's investment in the brand is worthwhile. Then I think you have a winning proposition.
Well, and on that note, actually, I never shared this with anyone else, but right before you guys did the buyout at Amazon, um, I knew something was up. I didn't know what it was, but I was actually approached by your category management department to help them with some of this, because my philosophy is that a brand is responsible for their product while it's on the shelf. It's not the retailer's responsibility to make sure they've got enough product to support a promotion, etc. So I'm trying to teach the brands how to
Right.
understand their numbers, how to understand how much of an increase they expect to get at a promotion, so that the retailers aren't always behind or having to try to solve other problems that really aren't in their way, that really are beyond their way of thinking. And what I'm getting at is that there's no retailer can possibly be an expert in every brand, every category, and every consumer shops or store. So that goes back to what I was saying
Mm-hmm.
before. So helping the brands help the
Mm-hmm.
retailers by, as you said, becoming a good partner. I think that's what's missing in this industry. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think we covered this topic. I think that's the right guidance, and it's different in every case. I can tell you, I've had 1,000 presentations plus some from different brands. Everybody approaches it slightly different, but I think those are the elements of a successful, moving forward. Is they take different shape and form in each individual relationship depending on the product. Could be a supplement, could be a piece of food, whatever it is, but it's relationships is what we're really talking about here.
Hmm.
Establishing a good two-way relationship that then will translate to the benefit of the customer.
Great. I'd appreciate that. So when you sold Whole Foods to Amazon, what was your relationship with them? Did you stay on for a little bit longer? What did that look like? And are you involved in that anymore today?
No, actually, we sold 100% of the company to
Okay.
Amazon. Uh, we had a board of directors because we were a public company, and at that time we wound down the board of directors, and because we were no longer a public company, we were a wholly owned subsidiary of Amazon.
Hmm.
The only responsibilities I have at Whole Foods today are chair of two of the foundations that we helped to start, Whole Kids and Whole Cities. But I have no operating role
Hmm.
for the company. Certainly, still have wonderful relationships, friendships, and connections there. And it's nice to see the next generation of leaders coming up, ones that we hired and mentored. But that's the extent of my role right now.
So in these other things that you're doing, the Whole Kids, etc., what does that
Yeah,
look like? Because I think that's a fascinating program. I am such a proponent of teaching children about healthy nutrition, going back to where we started this conversation. So, can you
right.
talk a little bit about that and what did you do? Because I've heard you say that that's one of your most proudest achievements.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I'd love you to have do a podcast with Nona Evans, who's the executive
Sign me up.
director, and she's fantastic, and
Okay.
you'd get it right from the horse's mouth. But essentially, let's go back to the idea that a business exists for a greater purpose than making money. And in our case, it was to build to bring more healthier foods to the world. And as part of that, as you get bigger and larger, you can imagine you can do more things. We thought about uh, the nonprofit world and where could we do some additional good, which led to the formation of our first foundation, which John really championed, which was Whole Planet, which was this idea that of giving back into the communities from the countries in which we bought product to try to help those communities, and particularly the women in those communities, um, through the loan program and so forth, through what we call the Whole Planet Foundation. Then from there, the idea was the second foundation, which is around helping kids, was just inspired by the fact that if you want to help people change their eating, you got to start when they're younger, whether either put their hands in the soil or give them healthier food. And so what Whole Kids started with was a single salad bar. And then we've now, I think it's over 8,000 salad bars or something that we've put out there, including also then school gardens, and also education for teachers who are stressed and strapped for time. And we have a chef that comes in and helps them learn how to think about nutrition and talk about nutrition in the classroom. So the Whole Kids and then Whole Cities is really about the access for healthy eating education, and particularly in the inner cities and communities where they don't have the plethora of choices you probably enjoy in your home community. And there are many places like that have mostly fast food joints. And Whole Cities is all about this idea of helping in the communities where they don't have the fresh food access, but helping them make that journey and helping them with the information about that in a culturally relevant way. So each of these foundations came out of the journey of Whole Foods and a desire to do more and to impact more than we could do just by building stores, but taking on a larger role in the world, which Whole Foods paid 100% of the G&A on these foundations. So
Wow.
all the money raised went to the work itself. And so yeah, I think we're all collectively very proud of what those foundations have done. Whole Planet is the oldest, Whole Kids is the middle child, and Whole Cities is the young one. But I mean, they've had an amazing impact, not just on the communities they've served, but also on the team members who feel so proud and had the opportunity in many cases to volunteer to continue to support that work.
Well, and that's where the ripple begins because if you are what you eat matters, and if we can help young people appreciate food and the value of healthy nutrition, I think that's how we change the world. You've got a
Yeah.
lot of other initiatives that you're involved in now, food waste being a big one, and I know that you've invested in Food Mavens in Colorado. Can you talk a lot about that? One of the reasons that this is important to me is
Mhm.
because I've worked in the back room. I know as a grocery manager how much food we threw away. It's staggering.
Right.
I don't think people could even grasp the amount of food. And it's sad that that happens. So what got you interested in that? And then talk a little bit about that if you don't mind. And then what can we as brands do to help support that kind of initiative?
Well, I think there's already at least 10 that I've seen upcycle upcycled brands in the marketplace, offering the customers a choice to support the full use of the materials in the manufacturing process, which is kind of exciting, and I think many more to come. So, certainly that trajectory, any brand could start to think about their ingredients in that way, or thinking about there's a cracker that's going to come out soon that's going to take the whole rotation of crops on a field. So when the farmer typically does cover crops or whatever, all that will be put into the product. So all of that stuff is happening, but the mind-boggling number is, Daniel, that we either waste or lose somewhere between 40 and 60% of the food that we grow in the United States. I mean, the farmers, I was at a farm 2 weeks ago that's 100,000 acres. His number in the field is 40%. 40% they don't even take out of the field, and that's at scale. So, and then you throw on there the stuff that you and I've seen in back rooms or whatever, you're probably pushing north of 50%. So it's basically, and then there's also the food that it gets distributed in such a way that it doesn't meet spec or whatever have you, and it goes to the dumps. 25% of our dumps are food. So we've got a massive challenge and a massive opportunity because we have so many kids hungry, because we have so many people need access to the food, and yet we're wasting or losing a large percent of the food that we're growing. It takes so much to grow it. So I see it as an issue that we might not have been able to think about 25 years ago as we were focusing on just building the baseline around quality. But we now have the bandwidth to take this thing on, and many companies are doing that. In Tesco in London, their CEO is zero tolerance for food waste and is working in that direction. We have Food Maven in Denver, which is making a market for the lost food and trying to create a place for that to come to market at a discounted prices in a win-win business model. We have the Refed nonprofit organization based in San Francisco, which is working on public policy around this. You start to see some cities that are requiring businesses to have plans around their food waste, so that they're being more thoughtful about it as they go through their business. So I think you're seeing an issue whose time has come or is coming. You've got hotel chains that are saying, they realize that this is costing them a tremendous amount of money, and customers are, also want different sorts of foods. So I think I'm obviously involved with Food Maven. I like what they're doing, which is to essentially combine the old world logistics of picking the stuff up, but then the new world of data and technology to personalizing that offer to you as a chef or a buyer, so that you can make that choice of food. And so I think it's, food access, food waste, these are huge issues for the future. And it's just an extraordinary amount of food that is never gets out of the field. So we've got some work to do.
We do.
We've got some work.
Well, one of the things that I'm trying to help brands do, again, getting back to the strategies and the secret sauce, et cetera, is the demand planning. Helping a brand more effectively plan for promotions, regular turns, et cetera, including working with retailers and helping to fix the supply chain issues so that when the product gets picked out of the field, it shows up on a store shelf a lot quicker. Trying to compress that. I've got some interesting strategies around that. Some of the companies I'm talking to, et cetera. You are also a fan of Appeal Sciences. I looked at them on their website. What a cool technology to be able to extend shelf life. Are you an investor in that or advisor? Or actually, you are an advisor, right?
I'm an investor. I'm actually a board member as well for that. Cool. James asked me to consider joining the board, so I'm on the board, intimately involved with the company. It is, as you say, extraordinary breakthrough in the technology. What is most phenomenal about it is that he's actually using nature to working with nature rather than trying to dominate it, which is what I think characterized most of our industrial production efforts over the last 50, 60 years. So what I mean by that, he takes food waste, he takes the lipids out of that, creates a compound which he sprays on the vegetable to essentially create a second peel, if you will. And it radically slows down the oxidation and respiration of the vegetable, allowing it to extend the shelf life naturally. That is to say, working with nature's own laws. And it's going to be a worldwide company. It's extraordinary. It's just a breakthrough of science, but science in harmony with nature that is phenomenal. I think James is an unbelievable entrepreneur. He's building a great team, and he's already been accepted by the EU. And is looking around China, where they could definitely use some help on this sort of thing. But think about the potential for helping communities after a disaster, or helping inner city
Right.
communities where you could extend the life of fresh produce and make it in the same quality level, not a deteriorated level. And it's a phenomenal company. Phenomenal.
I am thoroughly impressed. I'm watching the video on their website, and I'd love to have them on the podcast. Side note, but anyhow, it's interesting about what they're doing, and to be able to celebrate those kind of new strategies. I think it's really inspiring when we share stories like that. So thank you for that. And I never understood why we put wax on apples, which is kind of strange. When now we've got a way to make extend the life of an apple. Talk about, please, Stonewall Rob. What is the goal there? What are you trying to do? Is it an incubator? Is it just sort of a hub for your ideas, your brands, etc.?
Yeah. It's just if you go to my website, it tells you what the Stonewall is, where it comes from, which is our family compound. But
Mhm.
it's a platform. It's a place from which to continue to bring my values forward in the world, whether it's through speaking, whether it's through investing, whether it's through consulting, whether it's working part time with S2G Ventures out of Chicago as executive in residence. It's just my base camp, if you will. I'm also using it to when I invest in companies directly, that's the entity that I use. So it's still information, and I have many more miles to travel and many more ideas to try. But it's my home now, and it's really got a really pretty cool story on the website, kind of what it means to our family. So.
It does. And again, the resources in there, all the different talks, and
Yeah.
listening to that, I've learned so much more about you. And again, you're so humble, and I'm so thoroughly impressed with all the things that you've done, how forward thinking you are, because we need more thought leaders like you in this industry to help solve these problems, to bring these problems to bear, to help shine a light on them. Because like you said, going back to food waste, I used to be a DSD driver years ago, and to watch the food get thrown out was just mind-boggling. That when I was trying to
Yeah.
feed my small family. So anyhow, thank you for all you're doing there. Is there
Well,
anything else?
you're very kind to spend time on the website. But thank you for doing that. But I mean, I think we're all in this together, and we know that now more than ever as the climate heats up. And we realize that there's a lot more that joins us than separates us, and we got to get
Mhm.
this. We got to figure this out, and we're going to do it as a team, and we're going to do it as multi generations.
Right.
And I think, whatever my role is, your role, we all play our role. We all help to push it forward. And we are more aware now than we were 30 years ago. We might have had our instincts might have been right, but we know a lot more now. So
Mhm.
therefore, we really have a duty and a responsibility to act on that and to bring these things forward. And there's a lot more that's possible now than was possible 30 years ago. So all in its due time, or in everything, to everything there's a time, as the birds sang in that song. I don't remember what the name of it was, but this is the time now to take the learnings and the foundation of the last 40 years and push it forward into the ocean, all the way into the ocean.
Well, in my opinion, that's what makes natural natural. That's why I love this industry because we do so much to help support each other. And my mission, your mission, etc. They align so nicely. So thank you for sharing that. I know we're
You're
coming
welcome.
up on the end of our time. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
No, I think just for people to recognize that we really have come to a juncture after 70 years post World War II, plus or minus, that we're on the doorstep of some meaningful changes, whether it's on the farm in the negative sense, the fact that farmers are not fully appreciated in our society for what they do, to the loss of soil in the production of food as it is, to the overuse of pesticides and fertilizers, but to the emergence of this new type of botanicals that are showing and plant compounds that are going to outperform the synthetic chemicals.
Hmm.
We've got this potential for a revolution up and down the value chain in food, which is really exciting. We are literally, recreating or creating a new food system in these different companies that we've talked, some of which we've talked about
Hmm.
today. So for people to see the magnificence of the moment and to double down on their efforts from wherever angle they're coming, to harness the power of technology and data platforms, not to be beholden to them, but to harness them
Hmm.
for the purpose of giving the customer better choices, more choices, faster choices towards that healthier end. And I guess I find myself fortunate to be at this I'm probably in the past halftime of my life, definitely in the third quarter, which is okay. You'd like to turn it back sometimes, but wonderful experiences I think give me the benefit of perspective, but also I'm genuinely excited about what I see as possible going forward, and I'm so impressed with the quality of entrepreneurship and talent that is bringing some of these ideas to life in the form of new companies, new brands, new retail ideas. So in general, I land on the optimistic side that we're on to something good here.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you
Good and
more.
tasty.
Well, it is. I think we've got a very exciting future, and I think that again, working together, we're going to solve a lot of these problems. And I think that the future's bright. I believe that completely. So, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Well,
I'll go
thanks very
ahead.
much, Dan.
I want to thank Walter for coming on today and for sharing his insights and his passion for this industry. It's so inspiring to listen to someone who's so humble, who gives so much to the industry, and we can learn so much from him. So thank you again, Walter, for sharing your insights. I'll be certain to put a link to Walter Robb in the podcast show notes and on the podcast webpage. For this podcast free downloadable guide, I mentioned earlier that I have something I've never shared before. This how to get your product on more store shelves. I thought this would be the perfect free downloadable guide because this free downloadable guide covers several of the things that you need to be thinking about when you're ready to present a new item to retail. Whether you've got distribution or you're starting out as a new brand, these are the things that every brand needs to know. You can get this instantly by going to brandsecretsandstrategies.com/session 137. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.